Under the light of two silent moons, a child lay in the dust of a forgotten valley. She was small, much smaller than the others of her kind. Her skin glowed faintly with silver marks. Her eyes shined like blue fireflies. The people of her world had whispered about her since the day she was born. They called her the mini alien girl, a strange one, a weak one, a cursed one. When she tried to play with the other children, they pushed her away. When she tried to laugh, they mocked her voice. Even the elders looked at her with fear, as if she carried something dangerous inside. She never understood why. She only wanted to belong. She only wanted someone to smile at her, but her people decided she was too different. They told themselves it was for the safety of the tribe. One night, when the desert winds howled like ghosts, they made their choice. The elders gathered in silence, their faces hard like stone. The girl's mother cried, but no one listened. The tribe walked far into the desert, carrying the child in a rough blanket, and there, under the pale moons, they left her. She woke in the cold night, her hands reaching for someone who was no longer there. Her voice was small, trembling, calling for her mother, but only the wind answered, carrying sand across the dunes. The stars above looked down like unblinking eyes. The child sat alone, the world far too big for her tiny frame. Her tears fell into the dust, and the dust swallowed them. Without care, days passed. The child wandered, weak but alive. She searched for food among strange plants, biting roots that tasted bitter. Sometimes she found water dripping from crystal rocks. Other times, she drank from shallow pools where strange creatures swam. Her stomach often ached, but she endured. Her legs trembled, but she walked. Something inside her refused to break. She learned to hide when shadows moved across the sand. Large beasts roamed the valleys, their eyes glowing in the dark. They smelled her fear, but she was fast. She crawled into cracks between rocks, holding her breath until they left. At night, she listened to the whispers of the wind. Sometimes she thought it spoke to her, carrying secrets from the stars. It gave her comfort, a small reminder she was not fully alone. But deep inside, a wound grew, not on her body, but in her heart. She did not understand why her own kind had abandoned her, why her mother's hand had let go, why no one wanted her. Her small chest ached with the question, "Am I truly cursed?" The desert was cruel, but the girl was stubborn. She learned to use sharp stones to cut fruit from thorn trees. She learned to climb high rocks to see the land. Her eyes, glowing faintly, began to see things others could not. She could sense when storms were coming. She could feel the ground shake before a beast appeared. She did not know it, but her curse was becoming her strength. Still, the nights were the hardest. She lay curled under broken branches, staring at the moons. She remembered the laughter of the tribe, even if it was never meant for her. She remembered her mother's voice, soft and trembling. She held those memories close, for they were the only warmth she had. One night, as she lay in the silence, she saw a light in the distance. It was not the glow of the moons, not the burning of the desert fires. It was different, sharp, like a star falling too close to the ground. The sky ripped open with fire, and a great object crashed beyond the mountains. The earth shook under her feet. The wind screamed in terror. She held her breath, watching the flames fade. Something new had entered her lonely world. The girl felt her heart beat faster. Fear and hope mixed together inside her. She had been abandoned by her own kind, left to fade away. But maybe, just maybe, the falling star was a sign. Something was coming, something that might change everything. She stood on trembling legs, staring at the dark mountains where the fire had landed, and for the first time in her small, lonely life, she felt a reason to move forward. The desert no longer seemed endless. The silence no longer felt empty. There was something out there waiting. She did not know it yet, but her story was about to begin, and the girl who was once called Mini Alien Girl would no longer be just a child abandoned in the sand. The girl walked for many days after the fire fell from the sky, her bare feet pressed into the burning sand, her tiny body tired but unwilling to stop. She did not know why she was moving toward the mountains. only that something inside pushed her forward. She was too young to understand destiny, but she was old enough to feel the pull of change. The desert stretched endlessly, waves of golden dunes rolling beneath the twin moons. The girl's shadow looked smaller with each step, yet her spirit refused to break. Her hair, silver black and tangled with dust, flowed like threads of night. Her glowing eyes scanned the horizon, always searching, always hoping. Every morning, she found new marks in the sand, footprints of beasts, trails of insects, and sometimes the smooth slide of a serpent's belly. She learned to read them, to know which paths were safe. Though she was small, the desert was slowly shaping her into a survivor. At night, the silence spoke louder than words. The stars burned bright, and she often whispered to them as if they could answer. Sometimes she imagined voices whispering back, soft and gentle, telling her to keep walking. Other nights, she only heard the growls of distant hunters, reminding her of the danger waiting. In the dark, but the girl did not stop. She found strange plants that glowed faintly, their juice sweet enough to give her strength. She chased lizards with quick hands, biting into their rough skin for food. Her body grew thin, but her will grew stronger. She was no longer just the abandoned child of her tribe. She was becoming something else, something the desert could not destroy. On the third night of her journey, she reached a canyon where the sand broke into sharp black stone. The air was cooler there, and the walls of the canyon sang with the sound of wind. Her small figure moved through the shadows, careful not to disturb the glowing insects crawling along the rocks. She curled into a small hollow and closed her eyes. But before she drifted into sleep, she heard something new. It was not the howl of a beast nor the whistle of the wind. It was a strange hum, low and steady, echoing across the canyon walls. Her eyes snapped open, her heart racing. She followed the sound, her feet silent against the stone. And there, beyond a ridge, she saw something glowing. It was not a plant nor a creature of her world. It was a piece of the falling star, half buried in the sand. Its surface burned faintly with blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. She stepped closer, reaching out with her small hand. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the light flared. Strange symbols moved across the shard, shifting like liquid fire. The girl gasped and stumbled back, but the shard did not harm her. Instead, it whispered, not with words, but with feelings, loneliness, strength, and hope, the same things that lived inside her. For the first time, she felt connected to something greater. The shard hummed like it recognized her, as if she was meant to find it. She pressed her forehead against it, and in that moment she did not feel abandoned. She felt chosen, but the shard was only a fragment. Beyond the mountains, the rest of the fire waited. The fallen ship, the true source. She wrapped her thin arms around the glowing shard, whispering to it as though it were alive. Then she let it go, watching its light fade softly back into silence. She knew she had to keep moving. The days that followed tested her even more. The sun blazed hotter. The nights grew colder. Storms swept across the desert, filling the air with blades of sand. She covered her face with rags of torn cloth, crawling into cracks in the rocks to survive. Each storm left her weaker, yet each time she rose again, her glowing eyes, once mocked by her people, became her shield. She could see through the storm's chaos, guiding herself where others would be blind. Still, she was lonely. She dreamed of voices, of someone calling her name, though she had no name to answer with. Sometimes she hugged herself and whispered to the wind, pretending she was not alone. Other times she cried quietly, her tears mixing with the desert dust. But every time she woke, she kept walking, because something waited beyond the horizon, something she could not ignore. Finally, after many nights, she climbed the last ridge of the mountains. Her feet bled, her lips were dry, but her eyes widened at the sight before her. The desert ended, and below stretched a valley filled with strange lights. There, resting like a wounded beast, was the fallen star, metal twisted and burning, smoke rising into the sky. It was larger than any structure she had ever seen. A ship broken yet still alive. Her heart pounded. This was no ordinary fire, no simple star. Something or someone was inside. The girl stood in silence, her breath shaking. She did not know that her lonely journey was about to change forever, for in that valley, waiting within the broken ship, was a creature unlike any she had ever known, a creature called human. The valley lay silent except for the crackle of fire. The great ship that had fallen from the stars still smoked, its metal body broken like a beast brought down by hunters. The girl stood at the edge, her small figure shaking with fear and wonder. She had never seen anything like it. Nothing in her world looked this way. The surface of the ship was silver and black, covered with strange marks that glowed faintly. Parts of it hissed with steam, parts sparked with light. It looked alive, but wounded. The girl's glowing eyes scanned the wreck. Her heart told her to run, but her curiosity pulled her closer. Step by step, she walked down into the valley, her feet crunching over black glass made from sand burned by the crash. She could feel the heat of the wreck even from far away. The air tasted sharp, heavy, full of smoke that stung her throat, but she did not stop. Then she heard it. A sound unlike anything she had heard before. A voice, low and rough, echoing from inside the wreck. She froze, her small hands clutching the rock beside her. The voice came again, broken words she did not understand but filled with pain. Someone was alive. The girl crept closer. Through a torn hole in the ship's side, she saw movement. A figure tall and strange crawling out of the smoke. He wore a suit of cloth and armor, his face hidden behind a cracked visor. He was bigger than anyone she had ever seen. Broad shoulders, long legs. When the visor broke open, she saw his face. Different, strange, not like her kind. His skin was pale, his eyes sharp and human. The human staggered, holding his side where blood leaked through his clothing. In his other hand, he carried a strange weapon, glowing faintly with blue light. When he saw the girl, he stopped, his eyes narrowed, his body tensed. The weapon lifted, pointing straight at her. The girl's breath caught, her knees trembled, but she did not run. She knew that look, the look of fear, the look she had seen so many times in her own people's eyes. But this time, something in her heart refused to step back. Slowly, she lifted her small hands, showing they were empty. Then, with careful steps, she reached into her pouch and pulled out a small crystal of water she had collected from the mountains. She held it out, her eyes glowing softly. The human frowned, confused. His weapon trembled in his hand, but he did not fire. The girl stepped closer until she was near enough for him to see the kindness in her eyes. She raised the crystal to his lips, offering it without words. For a long moment, silence filled the valley. Only the fire of the ship crackled around them. Then the human lowered his weapon. Slowly, painfully, he took the water, his lips touching it, drinking deeply. When he looked back at her, his voice was softer. Though she could not understand the words, still she knew he was not her enemy. For the first time in her life, someone did not run away from her glowing eyes. He looked at her not with hatred, not with disgust, but with curiosity. She pointed to herself and whispered a small sound, the only name she had ever used, a whisper of the wind. The human touched his chest and spoke a single word, Ethan. She repeated it slowly, her voice uncertain, Eat. Then, the human gave a faint smile, the first she had ever seen given to her. It was not a smile of mockery, not a smile of fear, but a smile of thanks. The girl's heart felt warm. For so long, she had walked alone in silence. Now, there was someone beside her, someone real. But even as the bond began to grow, the shadows around them shifted. Strange red lights flickered above the valley, scanning through the smoke. The girl knew those lights. She had seen them before. They belonged to her own kind. The tribe had come searching. The human stiffened, gripping his weapon tightly. The girl's eyes widened, her breath quickened. She wanted to speak, to warn him, but her words were broken, her language not his. Instead, she grabbed his arm and pulled, pointing toward the rocks. He understood enough, his eyes narrowing as he followed her into the shadows. Together they hid as the red light swept across the wreck, searching, hunting. For the first time, the girl was not running alone. For the first time, she was not abandoned in the dust. She had found someone who stayed beside her, even if he was not of her world. And though fear filled the valley, though danger hunted them from the sky, she felt something stronger than fear. Hope in the wreckage of fire and smoke. Two beings from different worlds had found each other. The girl, once left to die, and the human fallen from the stars. Their paths had crossed, and neither would ever be the same. The night grew colder as the red lights passed across the valley. The girl and the human crouched behind the sharp rocks, their breath slow and shallow. Above them, her people's ships hovered like dark birds, scanning with beams of crimson light. She pressed her small hand against the human's arm, urging him to stay silent. The human, Ethan, nodded slowly, his sharp eyes fixed on the sky, his weapon held close. The girl's heart beat fast, for she knew what those ships meant. Her kind had returned to erase her, to end what they called a curse. If they found her alive, they would not forgive. And now, this strange creature from the stars was with her. She feared they would kill him, too. But Ethan did not flinch even as the shadows of the ship swept closer. When the last beam faded into the distance, silence returned to the valley. The girl let out a trembling breath. She turned to look at Ethan, his face pale under the light of the moons. Blood still marked his side, his body weak from the crash. Yet, his eyes burned with a fire she had never seen before. It was not fear. It was not hatred. It was determination. Slowly, the girl rose and reached for his hand. Her small fingers touched his larger, rough ones. For a moment he seemed unsure, but then he allowed it. Together they moved deeper into the mountains, away from the wreck. She guided him to a cave where the wind could not reach. There, in the shadows, they sat facing each other. The girl pointed at herself, repeating the soft sound of her name. Then she pointed at him, whispering, "Ethan." He gave a faint smile and nodded. He spoke again in his own language, words she could not understand, but his voice was calm, patient. As if trying to teach her, she tilted her head, repeating some of the sounds clumsily. Her glowing eyes brightened as she laughed at her mistakes. And Ethan laughed too. Not cruelly, but warmly. It was the first time she had laughed in years. In the days that followed, a fragile bond began to grow. The girl shared with him the secrets of the desert. She showed him the roots that carried water, the caves where crystal drops formed. She climbed cliffs to bring him food, small creatures and fruits that she had once eaten alone. And in return, Ethan shared his strange tools. He gave her a small piece of cloth that warmed her skin. He showed her fire that sparked from his hands with a click of metal. She watched with wide eyes, amazed by his strange knowledge. Though they could not share many words, they shared something deeper. When she laughed, he laughed. When she cried, his eyes softened. When she pointed at the stars, he followed her gaze as if he too wondered what waited beyond. And in the silence of the nights, when loneliness once haunted her, she now had his presence. She no longer whispered only to the wind. She whispered to him, even if he could not understand. And somehow, his calm voice in return made her feel safe. But the world beyond their cave was not silent. Her people still searched, their ships flying low. The girl knew they feared her powers she did not fully understand. Sometimes when her heart raced, the ground beneath her feet trembled. Sometimes when she screamed, lights flickered around her like lightning trapped in her body. Her people had called it a curse. Ethan looked at her differently. When he saw her powers, he did not recoil. He only watched, his expression thoughtful, as though he saw not danger but possibility. One night, as firelight danced on the walls, Ethan tried to speak with her again. He tapped his chest, saying, "Ethan." Then he pointed at her, waiting. She hesitated, then whispered her name once more. But she shook her head, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "It is not real," she whispered, broken. She explained with gestures, with trembling hands. Her people had never given her a true name, only a curse. She was not worthy, not wanted. She expected him to turn away, like all the others before, but Ethan did not turn away. He leaned closer, his voice steady. He spoke a word she did not understand, then repeated it gently. He pointed at her and said it again, a name. A new name, given not by those who hated her but by one who accepted her. Her lips trembled as she repeated the sound. Her glowing eyes softened, her small hands pressed to her chest. For the first time, she felt what it meant to belong. Yet as warmth grew, between them danger stirred outside. Red lights returned to the valley, brighter, sharper. The sound of engines filled the air as her people drew closer. The cave shook with their arrival, stones falling from the ceiling. The girl's heart raced with fear. Her people would not stop until she was gone, until the curse they feared was erased. She turned to Ethan, her glowing eyes wide. This time, she was not afraid for herself. She was afraid for him. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen to stay with her. Someone had given her a name, and now she feared she would lose him. The fragile bond they had built was about to be tested by fire and blood. The night was no longer theirs. The hunters had come, and the girl knew she could no longer hide. The cave trembled as the sky filled with red light. Engines roared above the valley, echoing like thunder. The girl pressed her back against the wall, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She knew the sound. She knew the hunters who came with it. Her own people had returned, not to forgive, not to welcome her back, but to erase her forever. Ethan tightened his grip on his strange weapon. Though his side still bled, his body weakened by the crash, he stood tall. The fire in his eyes burned brighter than the red lights above. He did not know these hunters. He did not know the curse they feared, but he understood one thing. They wanted the girl, and he would not allow it. The ships hovered low, their shadows cutting across the valley floor. Loudspeakers cracked with harsh voices, words in the tongue of her people. The girl flinched, for she understood. "Give her to us." The voices roared. "She is cursed, she must be destroyed. Give her or both of you will die." The girl's small hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to beg Ethan to run, to leave her and save himself. But Ethan stepped forward instead, standing between her and the cave entrance. He raised his weapon toward the sky, his voice firm and unshaken. The words he spoke were in his own language, but she understood the meaning. No, he would not give her up. Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. Not because she was useful, not because she was powerful, but because she was worth protecting. The sound of the engines grew louder, the ground shaking as the ships drew closer. The girl felt her heart pound like drums. Her people had once left her to die, and now they returned. To finish what they started, Ethan pulled her behind him, motioning for silence. He crouched near the rocks, his eyes scanning the sky. He whispered soft words to her, his voice steady as if promising safety. Though she did not know the words, she felt the meaning. She was not alone anymore. The first strike came without warning. A beam of red light cut into the canyon floor, exploding rock into dust. The cave shook, sending shards of stone tumbling around them. The girl cried out, covering her ears, her glowing eyes wide with terror. Ethan pulled her down, shielding her with his body as dust rained around them. When the noise faded, he lifted his head, his jaw set, his weapon ready. The girl's people did not enter. Not yet. They circled above, demanding again, "Give her to us or we will burn the valley." The girl shook her head, whispering broken words. "They will kill you, if you stay." But Ethan only looked at her, his eyes steady, his voice low. He spoke a single word, and though she did not know his tongue, she understood, never. The girl's chest ached with emotion. Her powers stirred inside her, trembling like fire waiting to be released. She had always feared them, always hidden them, because they brought only hatred. But now, watching Ethan stand against the ships, she felt something different. Her powers no longer felt like a curse. They felt like a part of her, a part that could protect. The next blast shook the ground, fire lighting up the canyon. Ethan fired back, his strange weapon flashing blue against the red sky. The beam struck the ships, forcing them higher. The air filled with smoke, the smell of metal burning. The girl pressed her hands against the ground, her body shaking. Energy sparked around her, fingers, glowing threads of light weaving through the dust. She gasped as the power surged, not wild, not chaotic, but alive. It answered her heart, and her heart wanted to fight. The ships fired again, red light crashing down, but this time the ground. Beneath the girl pulsed with her power. A wave of light burst upward, meeting the beam and shattering it into sparks. The sky glowed with blue fire as her energy spread like lightning. Ethan turned, his eyes wide, but not in fear, in awe. The girl rose to her feet, her small frame glowing, her hair lifted as if caught in invisible wind, her eyes shining brighter than the moon's. The ships above staggered, their lights flickering. Her people cried out in alarm, their voices breaking with panic. She is dangerous, destroy her. But Ethan stepped closer, standing beside her. He did not shield her this time, he stood with her. Together they faced the storm of fire. He fired his weapon while she unleashed her light. The canyon shook with their defiance. The red beams clashed with blue. The night alive with battle. For every blast that struck, she pushed back with her strange power. For every ship that circled low, Ethan's weapon drove it away. The hunters had expected a cursed child alone. Instead, they found a warrior with a human at her side. And for the first time, the girl felt no shame in who she was. She felt strong. As the battle raged, the ships began to retreat. Their voices turned from command to fear. She cannot be controlled. She will destroy us all. Engines roared as they pulled back into the sky, their red lights fading. The valley grew quiet once more. The only sound, the crackle of fire and the girl's uneven breaths. Her body shook, her knees weak, and she fell. But before she touched the ground, Ethan caught her. His strong arms held her close, his voice whispering soft words she could not understand but felt deep in her heart. She closed her eyes, exhausted, but with a faint smile. For the first time she was not running, not hiding. For the first time she had stood and fought, and she had not been alone. The valley lay heavy with silence after the ships pulled back. The girl trembled in Ethan's arms, her body drained of strength, her glowing eyes dim. He whispered softly, his hand steady on her shoulder, his voice like a shield against the fear in her chest. For a moment she thought it was over, but deep inside she knew the hunters would not stop. Her people feared her too much, and fear never let go easily. Ethan laid her gently against the stone wall, then checked his strange weapon. Its glow flickered weakly, its power almost gone. He frowned, his face sharp with determination. The girl reached out, her small hand brushing his. She shook her head, whispering in broken words. "They will come again." Ethan nodded, his eyes hard, his jaw set. He knew she was right. The night grew colder as the stars wheeled above. For a time, they sat in silence, the firelight dancing between them. The girl thought of her tribe, the faces that had abandoned her. She remembered their voices calling her cursed, dangerous, unworthy, and now those same voices hunted her again. But when she looked at Ethan, she saw no hatred, only resolve, only trust, and for the first time, she wanted to believe. She belonged to something, not to her people, not to her past, but to this fragile bond beside her. The ground shook before dawn. Engines roared across the horizon louder than before. This time it was not just one ship, but many. Her people had returned with their full strength. Red lights painted the sky. Beams, cutting across the valley, searching for her. The girl's body tensed, fear curling in her stomach. But alongside the fear, something else stirred. A fierce spark of defiance. Ethan rose to his feet. Pulling her gently with him, he pointed at the caves deeper in the mountain, urging her to hide, but she shook her head, her glowing eyes fierce. "No, not hide," she whispered, her voice trembling but strong. She had hidden her whole life. She had run from shadows, from whispers, from her own reflection. Tonight, she would not run. The first blast struck the mountainside, shaking the earth. Stones rained down as smoke filled the air. Ethan pulled her close, shielding her, but she pushed forward. Her hands glowed with light, threads of blue fire weaving between her fingers. The power inside her rose like a storm, wild and untamed. But this time she did not fight it. She embraced it. The hunters descended, their voices echoing through loudspeakers. "She must be destroyed. She is the end of us." Beams of red light tore across the valley, burning the stone to ash. Ethan fired his weapon, blue flashes cutting through the smoke. His aim was true, but the ships were many. The girl stepped beside him, her small frame shining like a star. She raised her hands and the air crackled. Lightning burst from her palms, striking the sky. One of the ships faltered, spinning out of control, crashing into the sand below. The hunters cried out in panic. She cannot be allowed to live. But her power only grew. Her hair lifted in a halo of silver light, her eyes burning brighter than the moon's. She screamed, and the ground itself answered. Rocks split apart, sending shards flying upward like arrows. The valley shook as though alive. Ethan steadied himself, watching her with awe, not fear. He shouted her name, the name he had given her, reminding her she was not alone. The girl's chest heaved as the storm raged from her body. She felt the weight of years of loneliness, years of rejection. Her people had abandoned her, but they could no longer silence her. She was not cursed, she was powerful, and she would no longer be erased. The ships fired again, beams raining down. Ethan darted between blasts, firing his weapon with steady hands. Each time a ship drew close, the girl's power surged. Bolts of light struck, waves of energy rippled across the sky. Together they stood, human and alien, fragile and strong, against an army that once believed her worthless. But the battle came at a cost. Her body ached, her legs weak, her vision blurred. Every surge of power tore at her, leaving her breathless. She stumbled, almost falling, but Ethan caught her again, his voice steady, his grip firm. He did not let go, and that strength fed her own. The last ship circled above, its voice cold and cruel. If you will not surrender, then both of you will die. The girl's eyes narrowed, her small hands trembling. Ethan raised his weapon, though. Its glow was nearly gone. They stood side by side, ready for the final strike. The ship fired, a beam of red light brighter than any before. The girl screamed, pouring out everything within her. Her light met the beam, clashing in the sky. For a moment, the valley burned with blue and red fire. The ground shook, the air split. The stars themselves seemed to tremble. Then, silence. The beam shattered. The last ship spiraled, flames tearing across its body. It crashed far beyond the horizon, a final roar fading into nothing. The valley was quiet again. Smoke drifted, the stars returned, and the girl collapsed, her power gone, her body shaking. But once more Ethan was there, holding her close, his voice soft, steady, full of pride. She had fought not just for life, but for belonging, and she had won. The valley lay silent after the storm of fire. The smoke of battle curled into the sky, fading slowly into the cold night. Shattered rocks glowed faintly with the memory of her power, blue sparks dancing before fading into dust. The girl lay weak in Ethan's arms, her body trembling, her glowing eyes dim like dying stars. She had given everything, and now there was nothing left inside her. Ethan held her close, his arms strong despite his wounds. His breath was heavy, his face streaked with dust and blood, but his eyes never left her. He whispered soft words, words she could not understand, yet they felt like warmth. His voice wrapped around her like a blanket, steady and kind. She leaned against him, her small hands clutching his torn jacket. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of the silence. For the first time, the silence felt safe. Her mind drifted, memories flashing like shadows. The night her tribe abandoned her under the moons, the long days wandering the desert alone, the bitter roots, the cold nights, the endless questions of why she was left behind. Her mother's face, blurred by tears, her people's whispers of curse and fear. For so long she had carried those wounds. But now in Ethan's arms, the pain felt lighter, not gone, but shared. She lifted her head weakly, her glowing eyes meeting his. Her lips trembled as she spoke, her voice broken but clear. Why stay? Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years. Ethan understood enough, his eyes softening. He pressed his hand to his chest, then to hers, his voice firm. Though she could not understand the words, she felt their meaning. He stayed because she mattered. Tears filled her eyes, hot and heavy. She had never mattered before. Not to anyone. Her people had called her a curse, but this human, this stranger from the stars, saw her as more, not a monster, not a burden, but a life worth protecting. Her heart ached, but it was a sweet ache, the ache of belonging. The valley grew quiet, the hunters gone, the danger past. The moons hung high, their light silver on the stones. Ethan shifted, pulling her closer. His arms were warm, steady, unyielding. The girl curled into him, her small frame fitting against his larger one. For the first time in her life, she felt what she had always longed for. To be held. The night stretched on, and slowly her strength returned. She sat beside Ethan, her head resting against his shoulder. They watched the stars together, their breath slowing. She pointed upward with her small hand, tracing the constellations. Ethan followed her finger, nodding as if he understood her unspoken thoughts. The stars no longer felt cold, no longer felt like distant strangers, they felt like promises. For beyond them, maybe there were other worlds, other people, other chances. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the steady beat of Ethan's heart. It was strong, human, alive. It reminded her that she was not cursed, she was not empty, she was here, she was real, and she was no longer alone. In the days that followed, they built a life among the ruins of the valley. The wreck of Ethan's ship became their shelter. The girl gathered food as she had always done, but now she brought it back to share. Ethan taught her new words each night. Patient and kind, she learned safe, home, and friend, and he gave her another word, one that made her eyes glow brighter than ever. Family. She repeated it slowly, tasting its meaning. Family, something she had never known. But now, sitting beside Ethan, she felt it for the first time. Not because of blood, not because of tribe, but because someone chose her, because someone stayed. The bond between them grew, fragile yet unbreakable. They laughed together, they fought storms together, they watched the stars together, and in every moment the girl felt her heart heal, piece by piece. The loneliness that once wrapped around her like chains began to break, replaced with something stronger. Hope, yet deep inside she knew the future would not be easy. Her people would not forget. The stars held dangers yet unknown, but none of that mattered. For no matter what came, she was no longer walking alone. Ethan was beside her, and together they would face whatever waited. One night, as the wind whispered through the canyon, she sat in silence. Her head rested against his chest, his arms holding her gently. The stars glittered above, and she closed her eyes. A soft smile touched her lips. The girl who was once abandoned, cursed, and forgotten was no longer just a mini alien girl. She was someone's friend, someone's family, someone worth holding, and in Ethan's arms, she finally belonged.